In this video, I'll be going through an example of a student's extended response question to give you all a sense of what would be a good extended response question answer and how you would be able to improve your own responses in order to maximize your marks. So the next few slides will have a number of paragraphs which are from an answer which scored a B grade. So the question itself was, discuss the reasons why Australia records a current account deficit and why it fluctuates over time. So the answer had 3 paragraphs. So it had an introduction, one paragraph describing the structural drivers of the current account deficit, and one paragraph describing the cyclical drivers of the current account deficit. So in general, that is quite a good way of structuring a response. So you've got an introduction where you can include some definitions, and you've got 2 paragraphs which cover 2 distinct and important themes that answer the question that you are faced with. So what I want you to do in this video is pause it as you read through the example, because it will take probably a fair bit of time to read through the example, and then I will go through what I thought was good and what I thought could be improved on in this response. Okay, so with the introduction, if you want to pause the video here and read it, go ahead. Okay, so the introduction itself was quite a informative and useful one. So it started off with the definition of what the balance of payments is, and that's followed with some sort of reference to what a current account deficit is. What I would do in addition to this is to be explicit about how the current account deficit links to a government's need or country's need to fund expenditure above revenue. So again, this was somewhat covered in the explanation component of the introduction, but being a bit clearer would help in this part of the response. The definitions themselves, so the definition of the balance of payments was broadly fine. The components of the balance of payments was also covered, which is all quite useful for the reader and marker. So now on to paragraph 1. So if you want to pause the video here to read it, go ahead. In terms of what I quite like about this paragraph, I like the structure. So first of all, there's a topic sentence. So we talked about the Teal structure, where you've got the topic sentence, the explanation, evidence, followed by a linkage component. While this paragraph didn't have the linking component, that's fine because it had the first 3. So it begins with a topic sentence. So the topic sentence describes what the paragraph will be covering and flags to the reader what to expect. As we mentioned before, you want to try and make your answer as easy to mark as possible, and one way you can do that is by having a topic sentence. If there's anything you take away from this, I want you all to try and incorporate topic sentences into your paragraphs because it makes your answer much more readable, and at the same time it also focuses your ideas and thoughts and your writing to elaborate on that topic sentence you've chosen. So the paragraph starts with a topic sentence and is followed by an explanation of the topic sentence. So the topic sentence was about the structural reason why Australia records a current account deficit, and the explanation goes into the concepts of the saving investment gap, as well as the implications of a large amount of foreign investment in Australia, which is the net income deficit. So all these are really important concepts, and these concepts were then followed by some evidence. So the evidence relates to how Australia was experiencing a mining boom and that required foreign investment, and which resulted in the need to pay interest on these borrowings. So this I thought was a really good example of a paragraph. This is the second paragraph in the answer. So if you wanted to pause and have a read, go ahead. Okay, so as you can see again, this paragraph has a topic sentence. So the topic sentence lists that the paragraph will talk about the cyclical components or the cyclical drivers of the current account deficit. And the topic sentence is followed by an explanation. So I don't want to go through the content because that's not really the focus of the exercise today, but what I want to highlight is that there's an explanation, and within it there's some evidence which backs up the explanation. So this is a very good approach to take when it comes to writing paragraphs. So the next thing I wanted to do was to go through or highlight ways that you could have improved on this answer. So if you wanted to move up from B to A, in terms of this question. So this question asks us to explain key concepts, and when it comes to explaining concepts, the relevant grade descriptor here is this component here. So identifies and explains interrelationships between economic concepts, and for A grade, explains complex interrelationships. So complex is a new word between economic concepts. And there's also a bit of emphasis on applying a wide range of economic concepts rather than applying simply a range. So when you're looking to improve your writing, you need to highlight where you want to improve your writing and your responses, and then focus on those. So the key ways to improve would be to focus on complexity. Complexity and sort of width of concepts. So I'm going to give you some suggestions related to the answer that we have just covered. So in the second paragraph, this student mentioned that the current account deficit is impacted by global and domestic business cycles, and there's some mention of an impact on imports and the resultant impact on the deficit. What I would do in order to move so if I was the student that answered this, in order to move from a B to A, what I would have to do is I would have to explain concepts in more detail. So for example, rather than simply saying domestic growth leads to an increase in imports, I would have to elaborate to say that domestic growth stimulates investment, which then leads to an increase in import of capital and manufactured goods. So this extra step, this extra amount of detail is what differentiates a B answer to an A answer. At the same time, I might also include a conclusion, which summarizes the key ideas of my response, and that helps the marker recognize what I've mentioned in my answer and makes it easier for them to give me the marks that I would deserve because of the content I've included in my response. So hopefully that video was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me and shoot them my way. And again, practice makes perfect. So in order to get better at this, you need to practice, you need to go through exam questions, you need to try and incorporate a paragraph structure in your responses, and improve your understanding of the economic concepts that we have covered, as well as the relationships between them.